factors with you to claims management and prevention, and it's kind of a summary of what I came out with working for years on claims and litigation, working as well as testifying expert, assisting owners and contractors alike on trying to manage their claims, respond to the claims, and so forth. So as we know, construction stakeholders, typically either owners or contractors, are constantly dealing with challenges arising from schedule delays, cost overruns, resource limitations, and so forth, which in a lot of times results in disputes. Some of the issues also relate to changes which are disputed and so forth. But the key thing is that construction disputes typically can be resolved and mitigated without having to go to litigation if some of the preventive measures are implemented early on in the project. So this presentation is going to try to highlight the key factors and essential guidelines to avoid disputes and try to resolve them as contemporaneously as possible, as early as possible, and to effectively mitigate claims during the construction phase if you weren't able to, prevent it. I'll try to explain how the timely implementation of these measures can help reduce the exposure to risks and potentially increase your probability to actually succeed in this project. But before I start, if you hadn't attended my previous presentation, again, my name is Noor. I lead the project controls team at ASLPM, which is a PMCM and project controls company based in California. We work with mainly, I want to say, owners and some contractors on big infrastructure projects, either highway type of work, rail, transit, but also a lot of aviation work. As far as my experience, I've done a lot of scheduling, forensic and proactive, time impact analysis, change order evaluation on mixed use project, from mixed use to infrastructure to also military projects. I've also provided technical trainings to owners and contractors alike related to scheduling best practices, project controls best practices and principles, claims avoidance, and so forth. And I also teach at a couple of universities courses that are related to project controls, such as risk management, how to do planning, scheduling, cost control, things like that. And for people who are familiar with ASCE International, I'm a regional director for the Western region. That's Region 6. So again, things that I want to start with before I talked about claim management and avoidance is what are the types of construction claims and what are some of the things that result in construction claims or, lead to construction claims. And so what are some of the damages that typically, contractors or owners try to seek as a result of these construction claims? And finally, what are some of the key elements to keep in mind as we're doing, as we're managing claims or trying to prevent or avoid claims? But overall, there's no ideal project out there. Most projects that you probably have encountered have had some type of disputed elements to it. But the idea here is to try to go over the key pain points and try to address them. So I'll start with the types of construction claims. I've listed a few of them here. Obviously, this is not a comprehensive list, but those are the top ones that have historically resulted in claims. The first one, and I'm sure you're familiar with them, are the deferring site conditions or the changed condition. The second one is claims related to delays or delay claims. There's acceleration claims as well, disruption claims, or also we call cumulative impact claims. Constructive changes or changes in general may result in claims. Termination for cause also could result in claims, and then design errors or defective design. So I'll talk a little bit about each one of these in further detail. So what do I mean by deferring site conditions? There's two types of deferring site conditions generally. The first one, type 1, relies on a comparison of the subsurface information in the contract and the subsurface condition that were actually encountered. So you're looking at, what was a subsurface that was provided in the contracts in your geotech, documents, your drawings, other type of information relative to the type of condition that was encountered on site. The type 2 relies on comparison between the contractor's reasonable pre-award expectation of what the subsurface is going to be which is often difficult, to identify or substantiate, and the actual conditions that were encountered. So we're comparing what would a contractor would have reasonably anticipated for that specific location to what is the actual condition that was encountered. So those, if you hear type 1, type 2, that is what these two refer to. And generally, as we're looking at differing site conditions or changed condition, the first starting point, looking at, as a claims consultant or forensic analyst, is to start with the contract. How do you evaluate the merit or the entitlement of potentially the contractor for a differing site conditions claim? Starting with the contract, most of contracts would allow, and you have to check that obviously, a recovery due to differing site or changed conditions. And then you have to prove that the contractor in this specific situation relied on representations in the contract regarding those site conditions. So that's generally, for type 1. That first, as a contractor, you'll allow to recover those damages and time potentially related to the differing site conditions, and 2, that the contractor had to rely on those representation. And then the contractor, the second one, is that the contractor encountered a different condition from what was represented in the contract. And that condition or those differing condition resulted in, the contractor spending more time or spending more money. And then finally, that as a contractor, you've done your diligence, or you have, promptly pursuant to the terms of the contract, notified the owner when a differing site condition is encountered, again, pursuant to the terms of the contract. So, that will start you off, well in terms of either evaluating or putting together a differing site conditions claim or a situation that would, or a claim that is based on a differing site condition. The second type of claim, or biggest arena that I've encountered personally, are claims related to delays. And obviously, some of the differing site condition claims also have delay components in them. And a delay typically is defined as a delay to an activity is a negative variance to start or finish date of the activity. A delay to a project is typically defined as the event that pushes the completion milestone, substantial completion, final completion, or interim milestones. And in delays, there are different types of delays to look at. There's excusable, compensable delays. Excusable meaning that the contractor would typically be excused for those delays. That means that those delays were not within the contemplation or control of the contractor, and then the contractor was not responsible for those delays. Compensable, meaning that though the contract allows compensation, monetary compensation, to those delays because they were excusable. So, for example, it could be the owner delayed the design documents, which delayed the the start of construction because of extensive time that it took to review the documents. Those could be deemed, depending again on what the contract says, owner delays. Excusable, non-compensable delays are delayed again that are excusable, meaning that the contractor is excused for because they were not within the control or contemplation of the contractor, but they're not compensable. And an example that comes in mind, and again, it depends on the contract. And I'm going to repeat this a lot here, but it depends, because an example that comes in mind at first hand is weather. Weather is typically, and again, it depends on the contract. I've dealt with weather as being an excusable, non-compensable delay. But in other contracts, it could be compensable depending on the situation, obviously, that resulted in that delay. So that's an example. Force majeure could be also, depending on the contract, an excusable, non-compensable. A non-excusable, non-compensable delay is a delay that the contractor's actions or inactions resulted in that delay. So it's not excusable, meaning the contractor is not relieved from liquidated damages, and it's not compensable, obviously, because they delayed it. They don't get any compensation for that delay. Sorry. And then there is another type which makes, delay claims a little bit more complex, the concurrent and pacing conversation. Concurrent delays typically defined, and then it depends on what type of concurrent delays. Some of the industry terms, refer to functional concurrency, and some other, definitions pertain to, well, it's a delay that occurs at the same time. A delay that is caused by the owner is occurring at the same time as a delay that is caused by the contractor. So really, depending on what type of concurrency we're talking about, that could make the claim more complex. There's also pacing delays, which are typically a delay that is, purposefully initiated by the contractor to pace the project because of some other owner-related delay. So all of these will drive the complexity of your delay claim and your ability to recover time and monies, because in that claim. And in reviewing generally delays, there's a few things to look at. Obviously, we start with a contract review. What does the contract say about the contractor's ability or the owner's ability to discuss delay, to have a delay claim, to recover money related to delay? Be very mindful of no damages for delay claims, for example. Other clauses related to delay, related to time extensions. What can you as a contractor ask a time extension for versus not? And then next step is, as we understand, what does the contract say about how to deal with delay? Is ever the contractor, could the contractor be entitled to specific types of delay? We look at entitlement. Is the contractor entitled to that delay, depending on, again, what the contract stipulates. Then we start the technical part of it, which is, reviewing the baseline schedule, if that is existing, validating it, rectifying it as necessary, then looking at the as-built schedule, again, reconstructing it as necessary if it doesn't exist or is unreliable, and validating the as-built schedule. And potentially, if it's not reliable or available, doing, actually developing an as-built schedule and as-built narrative based on the daily reports and other contemporaneous documents. Then looking at the schedule updates. Does the project have schedule updates? Did the contractor issue updates as stipulated by the contract? What is the frequency of those updates? Can we rely on these updates? And if not, are we at liberty to rectify the update for it to become reliable, or do we have to reconstruct the schedule update? So those are the three steps related to our data sources from a scheduling standpoint to try to quantify those delays. And then we rely on one of the methodology out there for forensic schedule analysis. And there's different types of analyses to choose from, or methodologies to choose from. I would refer you to AACE recommended practice 29R03. It has a pretty comprehensive review of what methodologies are typically used to quantify delays. And then, as every methodology has a portion that discusses discrete events. So the idea is you want to identify and quantify the discrete impact events and understand causation, because at the end of this exercise, you're trying to establish and evaluate a stakeholder, either the contractor or the owner's entitlement of this for these delays, and also quantify the delays and apportion them. So very important to understand causation. So that's essentially the main steps to follow as to either the evaluation of a delay claim and or the development of a delay claim. The third type is acceleration claim. And there's two types of acceleration. There's a directed acceleration, where essentially the owner directs the contractor to accelerate the work, to complete the work earlier than anticipated, because they want to potentially either bring back a schedule that was delayed because of the owner's, an owner's fault, or because they want to deliver the project earlier. And typically we see this when it's a project that is revenue earning type of project. If it's trying to open a tolling, highway tolling area, or if it's to open a gate for an airport, because that's revenue generating, or to open a hotel earlier than planned, because that's just going to generate revenue, or even, for a development, mixed-use development, trying to open it early to generate rents and so forth. So These are the directed acceleration. And then the second type is constructive acceleration. And it's when the owner does not grant a time extension to the contractor, which requires then the contractor to accelerate the work to mitigate delays. And so usually, to demonstrate it, you have to show that the contractor did incur delays for which a time extension should have been granted. And then to notify the owner of the delay and request a time extension promptly, obviously under the terms of the contract, because it typically has notice requirements, and prove that the owner did not agree or did not grant a time extension to the contractor for those specific delays. And then that the contractor was directed or required to accelerate. Directed, then we're in the realm of directed acceleration. Required, when, well, that's the only way to mitigate some of the delays. And then provide a notice to the owner for the constructive acceleration. And finally show, as a contractor, that you've incurred additional costs to accelerate the work. So those are the elements of trying to demonstrate an acceleration claim or trying to establish an acceleration claim. The other type is the disruption claim, and those are, from my experience, harder ones to demonstrate. They're also called cumulative claim. They're typically resulted from things like changes, design clarifications, RFIs, scheduled resequencing, deference on condition or changed condition. And they essentially are any events that impacts the contractor's productivity. Sorry. And what you need for demonstrating a disruption claims is a detailed documentation showing the contractor's original plan, the reasonableness of that original plan, the discrete impacts or events that resulted in impacting the productivity, and that is all will help you prove or establish disruption or cumulative claim. A lot of people and a lot of contractor have to resort to what we call a total cost claim in these situations, just because it's we understand overall that a series of events resulted in impacting the contractor's productivity. It's just generally hard to break down those series of events, so they have to resort to what we call total cost claim. That is just looking at, well, this is the planned cost and planned schedule. This is the actual cost that was incurred. The difference was resulting from cumulative impacts that affected the contractor's productivity. They're harder to substantiate because they require a huge level of, documentation. And they're also harder to explain, especially when you are an expert trying to prove that disruption claim, because one of the steps of a total cost claim establishment is to demonstrate that the original plan, schedule, and cost was reasonable to begin with, right? Because that's, you're starting there. And then demonstrate that the delays and cost overruns were caused by those events that impacted the productivity. So, they're harder typically to substantiate, but, again, rely on documentation to, that's your best bet. The next big claim, type of claim is constructive changes. And again, changes are some of the biggest causes of claims and disputes in general. And a change, as defined in ACE RP 10S90, one of the other recommended practices in the industry, is an act or failure to act by the owner or the engineer that is not a directed change, just a constructive change, but which has the effect of requiring the contractor to accomplish work different from that required by the existing contract document. So, contrary to directed changes, which essentially is when you direct the contractor to make a change, a constructive change is when a contractor is required to make a certain change because of, because the work that they're accomplishing is different from the existing contract document. And the way to demonstrate a constructive change is to show that the additional work performed was not part of the original scope to begin with, that the contractor notified the owner of that change, that, the change was required by the owner, not volunteered by the contractor. It's not something that you're adding as a contractor, on a voluntary basis. It's that you have to make that change. And then that change resulted in the contractor spending additional costs and monies. And I can think of an example here where we argued constructive changes is, for example, when you're dealing with, let's say you have a steel structure and you have to go through steel fabrication and steel erection and then inspection. Well, you're doing inspection in the shop, but also inspection upon erection of the steel. And, for example, you have a plan that was somewhat reasonable, that the steel fabrication is going to take, let's say, 60 days, and then the inspection will take an extra week to inspect the steel. Now, what you're seeing is that the inspection took, instead of the 60 days, it took, the week, it took a month. There's a back and forth. There's what you call excessive inspection exercise and efforts. So a lot of times, we've seen contractor argue constructive change because that was something that was required. They were required to get steel, the steel that was fabricated inspected by the inspector. It took much longer than they could have ever anticipated under the contract documents. So those are generally the 5 types, the bigger ones, I want to say, of claims that result in potentially disputes. Now, pursuant to those claims, there's generally damages that are associated with them. And the first one is increased direct costs. And they're very much basically, understand that in a project cost, there are direct costs and indirect costs. Direct costs associated with the actual work, indirect costs related to overhead, including profit, home office overhead, general conditions and so forth. And so the first type of damages that you can claim in a lot of these claims are, increased direct costs, typically associated, for example, with constructive changes, associated with changed conditions or deferring site conditions, associated with acceleration, because again, the idea of accelerating is you're finding mitigation efforts, which could include adding crews, adding equipment, material, and so forth. So you could, claim increased direct costs in that situation. So those are the big ticket items for increased direct costs. The second one is the extended general condition damages, or specifically the delay damages. And extended general conditions are essentially the extra monies that the contractor incur from being on the job site longer than anticipated. So with a delay being an event that results in staying on the job site longer than anticipated, the contractor typically incur and expend additional general condition costs to stay on the job site. And typically that's what you claim under a delay claim, are extended general conditions. And they're generally inclusive of, trailer costs, for example, some specific equipment, utilities that relate to staying on the job site, supervision costs, project management costs, home office overhead, and so forth. And then the last one are liquidated damages, and they're typically for the owner to recover damages from the contractor, and they're also related to delays. Generally, the contract will include liquidated damages clauses that states exactly how much those amounts are, but they're defined in terms of, for example, a contract could say the amount of liquidated damages is $10,000 per day for the first 30 days, then $5,000 for the next 30 days, and then, that's the max, the 2 months. So you understand what is your liability as a contractor in delaying the project. And they're associated specifically to contractor-related delays, the non-excusable, non-compensable delays. Certainly, these amounts can be, very, very burdening for the contractor. That's why a lot of the contractors are trying to get relief from liquidated damages through time extensions. So with that in mind, we understand the type of the typical type of claims in construction, the type of relief or damages that stakeholders typically can resort to. Now, what are some of the claims management and avoidance key items or factors? So I listed them as 6. Obviously, I'm sure they're a much more expansive list, but they generally are lumped into those 6 ones, and I'll cover each one in a little bit more detail. The first one that I always start with is contract. And I remember attending actually one of the ABA, American Bar Association, forums or meetings, conferences actually, and one of the attorneys were referring to this acronym RDC. And, he was asking, do you understand what RDC is to the rest? And everybody seems to understand it. So I raised my hand and asked, what does RDC mean? I mean, I'm not familiar with the abbreviation. And it was, all to summarize, it was a summary of his presentation. And he said, read the contract. RTC, sorry, that's not D. Read the contract. And so the first starting point of every, every claims review or management or even trying to avoid the contract is to have a robust contract language. And that starts with, as a contractor, understanding all your notice provisions, and as an owner, including notice provisions in the contract. Having clear deferring and change site condition clauses that stipulates and explains what change conditions are, what examples of those are, and then what is the contractor's recovery method in case of, deferring site condition. What is the process to, for recovery of time and money in a clear way. And as a contractor, be very familiar with these clauses and understand the process and adhere to the process. The next one is scheduling provisions. And virtually every single claim that I've seen has some type of time component to it, if not also the cost. So with time, obviously time is money, so that's the starting point. And we have to have clear scheduling provisions through scheduling specifications, or at least define for the contractor, what needs to be included in the schedule, what is a schedule, the requirement of submitting a baseline schedule, what should it include, maybe stipulating what software to use, what method to calculate the schedule, what are the do's and not to do. Obviously, you don't have to go into all the detail, but, at least the high-level scheduling provisions, delay and time extension provisions. As a contractor, if you have a delay to the schedule, what is your recovery in terms of, time extension requests, the clear process of following those requests, the change order process to be clear, always make sure of that as the owner. Then the process of, approving a change order to be clear as well. Another thing that ends up being a big point of contention between the contractors and an owner is for change order. Is the contractor required to perform the work specifically in constructive change situation, to perform that change without the approval of the owner? And so a lot of the contracts are silent about the contractor's requirement to perform the work that is subject to that change before or after the approval of the change order itself. So try to be as clear as possible in the contract language as to the change order process, specifically when it comes to delay and time extension. Also make sure to have robust damages provision. And as a contractor, be familiar with your damages provision. What can you, what are the situations where you can recover damages, and what are the situations where you can't recover damages? That'll give you a clear idea of, how your risk, the risk that you're carrying as a contractor. And then finally, draft and craft out dispute and resolution provisions. And they're typically when there's a disputed change order, when there is a dispute generally between the owner and the contractor, what is the process? A lot of the contracts now include mediation provisions. Others include alternative dispute resolution, provisions that are required before you have to resolve to or to go to litigation and resolve the issue. So make sure from the owner's side that all these provisions are clear, and then from the contractor's side that you actually understand and that your team understands the contract provisions. And it's surprising sometimes to talk to, as surprising as it is, it happens, that while we're talking to the project management team, a lot of them are actually not that familiar with the contract or the construction management team. And so very important as a project team or the leader for the project to enforce this contract review and familiarity, especially when it comes to notifying and being transparent with the owner. The second one is document. It's project documentation. And a lot of times record keeping and fact keeping has been all the documents that are related to issues during the project. That starts also with having robust schedules too, right? To have robust scheduling and cost tracking, throughout the project. Make sure that the written communication has a specific, formal and respectful style and consistent. A lot of times, I've seen emails that either don't clearly communicate the message, or there's one email that has multiple issues listed. So try to keep, one issue per email, for example. That way it's easier to track and easier to keep. And if you need to send another email on an unrelated issue, that would be better than trying to lump everything in one email, generally. Stay consistent in how you communicate and who communicates, the chain of communication between the stakeholders. Keep track of the review and responses to submittals from general, design submittals, other, product data submittals, schedules, other reports, meeting minutes, things like that. Document the submission, the review, and approval. Set up a filing system or document control system, and then keep very detailed daily reports. And a lot of time, daily reports is where we find the best information on the project, especially when it has, weather data, for example, included. It has scheduling data included, crew information, like how many, how many work trades are on the project. Things like photos also of the progress of the project. When there is shutdowns, the reasons for shutdowns and things of that nature. Keep as much as possible productivity data. And, especially when you have certain production rates or you have productivity issues, that's the only way for you as a contractor to prove a productivity claim. It's going to be harder and harder when you don't have backup data for that. Keep the cost data as well very well organized through your cost reports, through your organized bid sheets, cost reports, things of that nature, and then set up a document retention and destruction policy. How long should a document stay in the system versus not? That helps better organize documentation within the project. So the first one, contract, read the contract. Second one, document. Third one, is related to schedules. Have a clear and clean schedule management process. From an owner's perspective, and from a contractor's perspective, understand the technical qualification of the scheduler on the project and make sure that schedule is well vetted, experience with similar projects and things of that nature. Set up a schedule format and methodology that stays consistent throughout the project, because you always have to think of, in case of a claim or dispute situation, there's always another third party that's going to come after the fact and review all those documents. Would this current schedule management process that you have in place be enough for them to unveil and investigate what happened on the project? And a lot of times when there's a dispute, the answer is no, because it just, the schedule is not properly maintained or unreliable, has quality issues. Maybe the assumptions within the schedules are not documented. And remember, some of those cases and some of the claims are raised years after the project is complete, or go to trial years after the project complete, where maybe that scheduler is no longer involved on the project. So it's really hard to try to trace back as a third-party independent analyst, trace back what the assumptions were made. You're trying to recreate what happened without basis for what happened, and it makes it much more complicated, much more costly also for the parties. Have clear technical specifications and timeframes to submit the baseline schedule. And as a contractor, try to adhere as close to possible to those submission requirements. Have a clear also and streamlined procedures to review and approve the schedule. Who is in charge of reviewing the schedule? What's the time frame to review the schedule? What is the comment process? What is the format for that as well? Set up meetings or workshops with the contractors to review the schedule, to vet the schedule, and then to review dates, to hear from them also as to what their assumptions are, and keep records of that. How to deal with the early completion of schedules. What is the process of early completion schedule? What is who owns the float in the project, right? Those are all things that have to be clearly defined at the beginning, because they could be a subject of contention on the project. What type of procurement and submittal activities do we have in the schedule, and how do we track them? What is the acceptable schedule quality? And you can be certain on the contractor side, as you're developing the schedule, that the owner has their own schedulers and third-party consultants that are reviewing your schedule and determining whether or not the schedule is of a good quality or not. So instead of just developing the schedule and dumping it on the owner, it is a good exercise to vet yourself the schedule and review the schedule quality before you submit it to the owner. What is the procedure to submit time extension requests? What's the procedure? What are the time frames to try to streamline that as well? As the time extension is being reviewed and approved potentially, what is the obligation from the contractor side to complete or not the work? Some contracts will require the contractor to complete the work and to continue the work as the change order is being reviewed. Some others will, state that as the change order is being reviewed and approved, the contractor needs to stop the work or suspend the work. And then if the contract is silent, how can you set up a process with the contractor? What are contractual remedies for failure to comply to the contract? So that's specifically from the owner's perspective, but also from the contractor's perspective. If, for example, the contractor doesn't submit the schedule on time, what is the contractual remedy for the owner? If the owner is taking much longer than anticipated to review the contractual documents, the drawings, the submittals and so forth, what is the remedy contractually for the contractor, and to be very familiar with it. So that's for the schedule management. Have a robust schedule management and a robust change management process. Have clear bidding and contract documents. And a lot of times there's issues that come later on with unclear contractual documents, defective contractual documents. So that's your starting point. So you want to make sure that they're as clear and adequate as possible. Perform a constructability review. That's from both sides. Are there any alternatives to construction that could be proposed that maybe could streamline the schedule or could cut on the cost? Have these conversations early on. A clear change order process. We talked about that. Notice requirements, proposed change order and the time frame for that, review and approval from the owner's side and the time frame of that, and then what is the contractor doing at the same time or in the interim? Are they allowed to continue the work? Are they suspending the work until they hear from the contractor? So be very clear as to those elements. And then timely resolution of disputed change orders. A lot of times, litigation could be avoided through timely resolution of issues in general. Negotiation between the parties, contemporaneous review of things. So don't wait and say, I'm going to wait until the end and then I'm going to do global resolution. That likely will not result in, the issues being resolved. That likely will lead to litigation. So try to address the issues, specifically change orders, as they're ongoing. And then a robust risk management process, a robust way to identify, quantify, and mitigate the risk factors in the project. Early on, planning an identification of the risks, and then incorporating that in both the schedule and cost. Schedule through, your contingency activities or durations, and cost through your contingency line items. And then understanding the risk impacts, those factors impacts on the cost and schedule, and then how are you planning as a contractor, also owner, to mitigate those events as they occur. And again, risk management is iterative process, so it can't just happen at the beginning of the project, hoping that we'll address things, towards the end, and we're good with the initial, let's say risk register. It is iterative. It has to be updated pretty regularly to understand how risk factors, changed, the probability of occurrence of every risk factor has changed, and then how the impact of those risks or risk events have changed, impacts on the cost and schedule. And then finally, communication, enhanced conflict resolution process. Try to set up workshops about partnering, more workshops than, threatening emails or letters, for example. Try to enhance your communication and have open communication. A lot of times, disputes result from poor communication, either written or verbal. Have a clear, dispute resolution process in the contract. But most importantly, when conflicts arise on the project, try to elevate them as soon as possible. That way the resolution goes from, the project level, and it helps with the chain of authority. Help fast track things, a resolution of issues. Be more transparent and open from both sides as to your forecast in terms of cost and schedule, because a lot of times what we see is a lot of contractors tend to, always show the positive things, always show that we're going to continue, finish on time until they're no longer able to, constrain and crash that schedule. And then all of a sudden we're carrying delays that really were incurred much earlier on the project. So try to be as transparent and open as possible. And then have everybody involved in the planning process and get feedback from all the parties, contractor, owner, and subs as well in the planning process. So I think I'm close to time, but I want to finish with key takeaways. First of which is, claims are costly and often, result in litigation. They're costly because, especially if it goes to litigation, you have to hire experts, you have to hire attorneys, you have to, extend your staff working on that specific claim. And, it's very, very costly to the project and to stakeholders. So it's in no one's advantage to take a claim to litigation. And for that reason, the key factor to better manage and also to avoid maybe those claims that will result in litigation is to have a robust and comprehensive contract documents, to have better communication, to also have a robust schedule management and a scheduling team that, understands the contract pretty well, that adhere to the contract. I'm talking about the contractor side, and that has a very, very good familiarity with the type of project, the scheduling practices, industry practices, and so forth. Have a robust risk management process that is iterative in nature, and then have the scheduling team communicate with the risk team, robust change management and clear change management process. Focus on documenting everything on the project and have a good document control, clear and organized document control and filing system. And then elevated dispute and resolution process where you're involving, the executive team. And in that level, it's often, streamlined to resolve the issues then on the project site. With that, I think I covered most of what I want to discuss. Obviously, there's much more to discuss on this topic of claims resolution and management, but I wanted to just at a summary level discuss the key items and factors that might help you both avoid, but also when it happens, manage their claims. So let's check questions here. Thank you very much, you guys, for the feedback. Yes, I'll share the slides. I believe the Project Controls Expo will share the slides with you. And then you'll have I believe you'll have the recorded presentation as well. So, and if you're not able to locate the slides, I'm happy to send it to you as well if you connect with me on LinkedIn. All right. Any other questions? I know it's probably very early for some, very late for others, given the time differences, but I appreciate you guys. I appreciate your participation and attending the session. And again, like I said, if there's any follow-up questions or requests or discussions, I'm happy to follow up after this presentation or through LinkedIn. From the Project Control Expo team, are we good to close the session?